Hey everyone, I'm so excited because today we have David from History for the Ages. I
That's
want to
right.
say History of the Ages because you are of the ages too,
Yeah,
because we
for the
are.
ages.
You are for the ages, history for the ages. And you guys, this is so exciting because this is one thing that I love, 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 love talking about is the just social studies history in general has become such a great part of our homeschool, and it's such a huge inspiration for learning for our whole family, and especially for my son. He loves it. He digs in. I find him reading on his own, the ancient civilizations, like reading. Who reads a world history textbook on their own for fun? I mean, come on, right? That's
That's
kind of
right.
weird. But that's what he's like. And he loves all of that. And it's part of our culture. And so that's what David and I are going to talk about today.
Right.
I am so excited to share him with you guys because talk about love for history and
Yeah,
love for learning. David is all about that. You
sure.
guys, he is so wonderful and so inspirational in his videos on YouTube. And then also, he's a professor as well of history. And I love the reality that he puts on everything, just like, hey, this is just real life kind of thing.
Yeah,
And this is just the way, this is just life. This is how we live. This is just who we are. And I love that. So, David, can you share with us a little bit today
sure.
about who you are, why
For
you
sure,
love
of course.
history so much, and how you got started making videos for
Yeah, no.
everybody?
So when I was 18 years old, I was taking a history class at a community college. I share all this every start of a new semester. I share this with my students. And I tell them when I was 18, I was sitting in a history course. I went to my professor about halfway through the semester and I told him, I really like this stuff. I want to teach history at a community college. And that's what I've been doing since I was 24 years old. I'm now 28 years doing this, 25 years at my current college. I love it. I love teaching history. It's my passion. I enjoy it. And for most of those years, it was just me in the classroom. And the way this all kind of started to grow and blew up a bit is when we went to COVID. Everything had to shut down. They go, you have to do online. And I'm like, all right, what am I going to do? And I just recorded my lectures. And at first, I just, they said, just put them on YouTube and then you can kind of connect it to the Canvas course shells, and that's where students will watch it. And after a semester or so, I started to look at the numbers and how many students I have and then how many views I was getting. And I was starting to see there were people who are not my students watching this stuff. And I started to get messages from like some of my former students. It's like, oh yeah, my kid's now in college and they're watching your lectures instead of their professor's lectures. I thought that was hilarious. And then also at the same time, even before COVID, I'd been working with a homeschool learning center, a lady who I knew really well, still know really well. And years, like 10 years ago, she invited me to her homeschool learning center and she said, can you come and do lectures for us? And I still do. I was just there a couple of weeks ago doing World War II. And, I saw that group was so into it. And then I started just connect with the homeschoolers. And then the YouTube channel really took off. And so I get a lot of viewers who are homeschoolers, a lot of just history buffs. We're almost like at 28,000 subscribers now, I think, pretty close, and over 850,000 views. And some of these are longer videos and people are sitting there watching it. And so for me, this has just been really fun being able to share, history. I tell my students I could lecture to the walls and I'm having a good time. I love it. And, to also, I tell my students history is not just about memorizing dates and names. I tell if you memorize any dates in my class, I'm going to be unhappy with you. It's understanding why things happen, connecting it to who we are today, right? And one of the things I ask my students is learn the contributions other civilizations have that we still impact us today. And when you travel places, if you know history, it has so much more meaning. So for me, it's all about that, just the joy of learning, the love of learning, and, teaching about really important things, especially things that connect with what we see in the world today, like everything in Israel. I have a lot of lecture content on that. And it's heartbreaking to see so many people, they watch these 10-second TikToks and they think they understand the Middle East. And I'm like, no, you got to really dig into this and understand it. And then it's all very clear. So, yeah, that's, I guess, what I would start with.
Yeah, no, that's so fascinating. You tell right away you have so much passion and so much inspiration for history and for learning. It's so fun. And that transfers over definitely in your videos. And some things I think all the time I hear parents saying, oh, we haven't done too much social studies, or we haven't done too much history, or we need a history curriculum. We
Yeah.
need something like that, or our history curriculum super boring. What would you say to parents about that, and how, we can use all things around us?
So yeah, so I actually made a video about one of the things I put is how to make history exciting for children. Most of my content is for, I would say, ages 12 and older, because I designed it first for my students. But I've had parents tell me their 8-year-olds have watched my stuff and have enjoyed it, so that's really cool. I have one of my recent lectures about the inflatable armies that were used during World War II. Fake tanks and fake things, and it's like, the younger kids might like that, even though they don't understand the full context. So I think you can make history interesting in many ways, even for younger people. Young age, historical reenactments, those are great. I took my 7-year-old to historical reenactment, and she still remembers it, right? When she was like a couple years ago, and it's like, oh yeah, I saw George Washington, and she learned how to make a quill and that they used back then. And I think that's a great way. I really encourage family conversations, right? Especially with grandparents, because it's real. They went through it. One reason I was interested in history is knowing my whole family history, right? And it's like, wow, that's such an amazing story they went through. And so knowing that, I think, is a great way to get kids excited about history. Museums, I mean, there's all sorts of museums that I think can inspire people and kids to learn. Another one that's fun is food. I have a video on how to make shakshuka. And it's this great dish then from Israel, and there's a little history to it. And so as you're cooking, as you're baking, you could teach, what's the history of this dish. So there's so many ways you could do it other than just reading a book. And of course, reading books are great. I'm a big believer, for me, reading is primary sources. I think that's probably one of the best ways to study history, but that's hard for younger ones, right? Primary sources are when you get older and you learn how to read and interpret and biases and all of that. That's a thing for the older ones. But for the younger kids, I think all those things are a lot of fun. The reenactments are great. That really gets kids going into it.
There's so much wisdom there, you guys, and there's so much inspiration in everything around you. We always say learning happens everywhere all the time, right? And when learning happens everywhere all the time, you are constantly looking for the things that are around you that we can gather wisdom from, or gather some information from. And one of those things is always travel, right? Like you
Right.
said. And one of my
Yeah.
friends that homeschools, she said she homeschooled very box checking, like, for a long time, and then she kind of decided, I need to get out of the box, and she said, we're going to Hawaii for a few months. She says, how many days can we really take off, right?
Right.
And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? You're
So Pearl
going to
Harbor.
Hawaii. There's so much
Right.
beauty there, then so much nature, so much history, so much
Yeah, yeah.
culture. I'm like, go, you're learning while you're
You are.
there.
You are.
And
I
she was
mean,
like,
I talk about travel with my students too, and I say, I use this example every semester, the D-Day beaches, right? That if you don't know any history and you go to D-Day beaches, it's sand and water. You might as well be at your local beach. It has no meaning. But if you know the history and you teach the history before that travel, and you say, hey, there were 18, 19-year-old boys who laid down their life on that beach to be free, then when you walk there, it has so much more meaning to you. So I think part of the traveling is you do make it a history lesson first. I think that really helps, because then you see it and go, oh, wow, this is really cool because I know what happened there. And so for me, I've been very lucky. I've been to Israel and Spain and France and England and Greece. And I find in my courses, the students really enjoy when I bring in those historical trips I took. And, my World War II lecture on D-Day is almost all, it's not from the reading the books, as many books as I've read. It's from actually of being there, talking to World War II survivors, veterans. That's, history at its core. And I do a lot of that when I can. So I think that's great
yeah.
for homeschoolers, anybody, even history buffs.
Absolutely. And it
Yeah,
really connects you to a place, I feel like. It really allows you to connect and feel like you understand a little bit more and you
absolutely.
can kind of connect things
Mhm.
together. I know when I was teaching high school English, I did a lot of project-based learning, and one of the projects that we did was to write a children's book about a historical event
Oh, fun.
and in our local area. And so we live in Northern California, so the kids did a lot of like mission versus, California
Mhm.
missions and, Native Americans
Yeah,
out here and things like that. And then pioneer days and, all this stuff.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it
yeah.
was
Good.
really amazing. And then we went and we read them to the elementary school kids.
Oh,
And it
fun.
was really cool to be able to see the kids. They'd have to go there. They'd have to go to
Yeah,
General Vallejo's home, or they'd have to go to
yeah.
the mission, or they'd have to go somewhere. And it didn't have to necessarily be super old. It could be, I said it had to be at least 30 years back. So
Sure.
it
You
wasn't that
learn the
old.
history that, and then you enjoy that. That's what people watch. I've had parents tell me, I'm going to have my kids watch your videos because then they're going on a trip to that place. And I'm like, great. And then that's where I have my unit studies too, that people can go and get and really, learn from. And then another one, movies. Movies is another great way to learn history, because the things with movies, of course, any historical movies, they take them and they just demolish the real history, but you can then go and research that and learn from it, right? And there's some movies like Christopher Nolan does Dunkirk and Oppenheimer. They're obviously more rated R for older ones, but he really is passionate about the history, and it comes through in his movies. And then you see, oh, I forgot the guy's name. Made Gladiator.
Oh, yes.
Um,
I don't know the name,
Oh,
but
yeah, I forgot the
fascinating.
director's name. And his stuff, he doesn't care about. He made Napoleon and Gladiator, and it's just such a historical mess. I mean, he had sharks in the Colosseum. I'm like, come on, you're not going to have sharks in the Colosseum. But, did they, somebody might research that and they learned they actually did flood the Colosseums. They did. And they had naval battles there. But so you could watch the movie and then, go and research it as well. So that's kind of a fun way to do history as well. Obviously, age appropriate with some of the movies. But I think that's another way you could do it.
Yeah, there's such wonderful inspiration there. When love of learning is high, you guys, what happens is that kids take that and, like David said, they go and they just run with it. And so
Yeah.
either they're old enough to do it themselves, or you can help facilitate that with unit studies or with a project or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. Or even just a trip to the libraries.
Yeah.
But watching a video or a documentary, I know my son was watching, well, we were watching it together, but I fell asleep. It was the fall of, I don't even remember. Oh, Bronze Age civilizations. That was
Okay.
what it was. Bronze Age
Sea
civilizations.
people.
And he afterwards, it was a very long documentary. And afterwards, a few hours later, I saw him sitting in the chair, and he was reading his ancient civilizations book. And I said, "Buddy, what are you doing?" And he was like, "Oh, well, there was a lot of similarities that I saw in all those fall of those civilizations. And I was just looking in this book to see if that was similar for other places around the world." And then he comes in here, and like I said, literally we inherited a world civilization or world history textbook, and he got it. And I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Oh, well, I was looking in that ancient civilizations book, and it didn't really have a lot of different
Mm-hmm.
civilizations in there. So I was thinking this book would." And I know textbooks, and I know, and I'm like, "No, they're not gonna, but it's okay. Hey, check it out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it,
Yeah.
buddy."
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
then he was writing and he was doing this stuff. I'm like, oh, hours later, what is it? What is he
Yeah.
doing? He shows me this timeline that he has. He says, "Well,
Wow.
I found out that these are like 5 different things I found out that were similar in all these civilizations." And he says, "And here's where we are now."
That's another really good one,
And
because I mean, I cover this with the fall of the Roman Republic and the rise of the Roman Empire and my videos and my lectures. It's, yeah, how can we learn from this too, and see similar things across different times and civilizations? I think that's a great way to do it too. And
you know what? Go ahead.
I was going to say, everything you're talking about also shows why the students I have who are homeschoolers do so well in my courses, is because they're not just learning to a book or a test, right? I mean,
Right.
they're learning because they want to learn. And so I find when they come to my classes, they're just more interested in learning. They're more passionate about it. They're more engaged. And I see that all the time. And even it's not just, just me seeing it. We see it in test scores. We see it all the time. Homeschool students end up doing better. It doesn't mean public school students can't do great as well, right? Of course they can, or private schools as well. But I think there's something about that learning system in homeschoolers that make them interested in wanting to learn, prepared. They're also super polite. I notice that all the time too, which I appreciate. So yeah.
I see that too. Definitely. And you go to a homeschool field trip and it's a lot different than you would in a public school field trip.
Yeah.
But I love that you talked about discussions and
Yeah.
family discussions. So can you talk a little bit more about how that impacts a love for history, a love for learning?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if it's somebody you know, your grandparent, and they start telling you a story of where they came from and what, I mean, things have changed so much in 100 years. It's really just mind blowing if you think about it, right? I use this example: if somebody was born in 1869 and died in 1969, it's a 100-year period, but they literally went from crossing the United States on horse and carriage to man landing on the moon. And so to learn that from people who went through that time period, no matter what it was, even your grandparents tell you about their grandparents, then it's really, wow, that's how they lived. And I think it just does make it just real to you. It makes it, interesting. And then you go and you read more and you study more about it. So I think just any of those family conversations are wonderful. Going to a veterans center, going to a senior center, right? It's all good stuff. It's all, it's so much rich history there. And, one of the things I'm very passionate about is World War II, the Holocaust. And I tell my students this, and I hope everyone listening, really, this is, I think, pretty profound if you think about it. I tell my college students, they are literally the last generation that will have a chance to meet a survivor or a World War II vet, because that generation is almost gone. And their kids won't have that chance. So when I do my lectures on World War II, I tell them, hey, this isn't about you just learning this information for a test. You have this responsibility, because if you look at our world today and the global rise of anti-Semitism, our colleges today are just horrid. I mean, it's become the epicenter of anti-Semitism in the US. And it's because that history is not being taught, and a lot of other reasons as well. It's a whole other video I have talking about how we got to that point in colleges. But I think it's very important people connect with that older generation before they're gone.
I just actually got chills when you said that, because
Yeah.
it's such an important, just and absolutely World War II vets in general. I mean, there's
Yeah.
so few left.
Yeah.
There's so few left.
Mhm.
And my grandfather was one of them. And
Right.
it's just amazing. My dad actually found out he actually earned, so after his death, he earned a bronze, we learned that he had a Bronze Star, and he
Yeah.
actually just the other, like 2 weeks ago, we found out he had two.
No.
So it's just
Yeah.
really interesting that that family history, it makes you part of who you are. It
Yeah.
gives you a foundation for who you are
Yeah.
and your kids.
When I started to lecture 28 years ago, I'd ask my students, raise your hand if you have a relative alive today who fought in World War II. Almost every hand in the class went up. And
Right.
I did it to show them, look how big that war was. You all have somebody
Right.
who's fought. Now I asked them that question. If I get one hand that goes up, it's a lot. And so I asked the same question, but now it's to show them how that generation is gone. And it's just seeing that over, it's crazy. It feels like I just started yesterday, but 28 years, and it goes by so fast. It's crazy.
It does.
Yeah,
It does. I feel you. I started teaching at 22, so I understand. It's been a while for sure.
yeah,
Yeah, definitely. And I love that, having these conversations not only with our family about history, but also in terms of current things. So,
yeah.
how do we incorporate current events, and how does that relate to our understanding of past things?
So yeah, I mean, for current events, obviously, the problem today is there's so much information, so much, and I feel bad for historians 100 years from now, because when we go back and do history, I look at primary sources, and there's just there's a lot, but there's only so much. there is so much information, and so much of it is wrong. So much of it, is on social media. People put things out. And to get to the truth today is harder than ever. It's really a challenge. And so, yeah, you start by looking at the current events, but then trying to really engage and trying to find the facts through a number of different sources, and looking for biases. I think that's a really important topic to get to study. So it's just constantly connecting events today for the past. Obviously Israel is something I'm very familiar with. I've taught the history of the Middle East for 25 years. And, I tell my students, it's like 3,000 years of history there. And so, yeah, let's break it down step by step, chronology. And this is the other thing, really important, chronologically. I think one of the biggest mistakes people make to try to understand current events is they want to pull something out that's like a little tiny fraction of time and try to make a conclusion on that without saying cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect in a chronological order. And when you do it in a chronological order, and you're not just nitpicking, taking little things out that selective you want, everything becomes very clear. I have, I think, 25 videos in my History of Israel playlist. And I tell them, you go through that in chronological order, there's no way you can't understand it. I had a student once who was a Muslim student. He, I didn't know this about it at the time. He took my History of the Middle East course, and then he comes back to me later and he says, before I took your class, I hated the existence of Israel. I thought Israel was evil, all the terrible stuff. And now he says, now I'm a Zionist. And I thought, wow, right? Because he came in there and he heard everything chronologically. And that in itself made him understand that, and what is Zionist? Zionist just simply means you believe Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state. What a crazy concept, I know. And so just understanding the whole history enlightened him to that point. And this is where I really think it's getting to, and it's very hard to change people's minds. We know this. Once somebody is kind of brainwashed already, it's really hard. So I'm very passionate about getting this information to younger people to learn it, and not to sugarcoat things, not to say that everything is always right one side or the other side. I don't think that's healthy either. I don't think you hide. You study U.S. history, it doesn't matter. You don't hide the civil rights. You don't hide the slavery. You talk about that stuff, but you explain it in the full context. And I think that's the mistake people don't make very often. I mean, we do this with U.S. history, and we want to flog ourselves all the time. And I'm like, yeah, we had things, but, think about it in terms of time and place. And, slavery, I was just covering this when I was talking about the Enlightenment, was something people still practice in the world today. And so what's the context of it? And understanding everything, I think, is so important to, talk about the good, the bad in the past, and not to sugarcoat it, not to erase it, but to also tell it in its full context. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. I remember I was a Native American Studies minor in college, and one of my professors said, and he was Native American, he said, they're just people too.
Yeah.
They're just
They were fighting each other as well.
Yeah, they were fighting each other as well. There were bad Native Americans. There were good Native Americans.
I tell my students, human nature has never changed.
Right.
Values and morals change all the time.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, the culture of the U.S. today is not the same as the culture of, other countries in the world today. And our culture today is not the same as it was 100 years ago. So values and morals change, but human nature doesn't. So
it's fascinating. And that is a great conversation to have with your kids about how things reflect on human nature. And that's something that my son and I talk about a lot, what does that tell us about people?
Yeah.
What does that tell us? And how do we make decisions in the future based on that? How do we develop governments? How do we develop this? It's like,
human nature. I tell my students, look, we're not born good. We're not. I mean, morality needs to be trained. It needs to be taught. Kids are mean. I mean, we all see it there, and we have this kind of inherent, conflict that we all are selfish, and teaching how to get through that. You could do that through history as well. The moral lessons. I use something called the Milgram experiment. If you've never been familiar with that, people can look that up. It's in one of my videos as well, in my World War II stuff. And it just basically shows how people were so willing just to follow orders. And this was an experiment they did post-war, I think it was the 50s or 60s. And they basically had somebody in a white coat tell somebody else to keep shocking somebody, and they kept doing it because a guy in a white coat told them to, without even questioning. And understanding that people will do this instinctively without question is because we don't study the history a lot. I think people who study history and are more grounded in that will be the ones to say, wait a second, there's a problem with this. It's, again, another important reason to study this stuff.
Completely 100% agree. I know it's a big part of our house. And if you guys aren't inspired by this conversation, I don't know what to tell you, because this is a very inspiring conversation. I want to go research some more. I want to go talk some more. I know that's part of just what we do in our house. And I know it's part of what David's is too. And it's really fun to watch his kids just reading different things and getting into history. It's really, really fun. So David, can you share with us a little bit about History for the Ages, your YouTube channel, and where we can find you and how we can get in touch with you?
Yeah,
and
of course.
By the way, your cool shirt.
Oh, yeah. So, I got the new shirts in the front here. I'll show you the back real quick.
Woo-hoo!
So I just got those recently. It's been fun, just some people wanting them and sharing them. So, I mean, obviously YouTube, it's just David and History for the Ages. I have the unit studies. I have a teachers paying teachers page, and you can go and you can get one of the unit studies for free there and look at it. I tell people you're probably better off messaging me directly through either my YouTube or my Facebook. I have a Facebook page. That's really another good place to go, is just, again, History for the Ages, and you send me a message there, follow me there. And I could always sell the unit studies a lot less directly to people than through teachers paying teachers, because they take a bigger chunk. But, I have my email address, this davidandhistoryfortheages@gmail.com. Message me on Facebook, find my History of the Ages pages there. And then, of course, YouTube, that's where all my videos are. You could watch and enjoy. The videos are all free. Anyone can watch them. I try to keep the unit studies pretty low cost. Basically, if you can get 3 courses worth of classes for $120, or if you just want a unit study on ancient Egypt, like $4 or $5, whatever it is, or ancient Rome. So, and I do bundles for people as well. So, I try to make it. And at one time, I really try to help people. I had one person, she gave me $150 for $120. And so I told somebody, and I said, anyone wants $30 off, I'll pass that on to you. And I did. And a few days later, some lady contacted me, or next same day, and said, I'm like, sure, I don't care. I want people to learn. So I'm happy to work with people. And, it's a nice supplemental income, and obviously it helps and to get that. But it's more about me just reaching people and teaching. And if I could help people with it, great. And the shirts are fun. You can always message me if you want one of those. And those have just been kind of, I don't have many of them, but they've been fun to make those. So, I just really appreciate talking with you today. And, I hope people are inspired and want to learn history more. And feel free to reach out to me. Again, Facebook, YouTube, it's all good.
Yeah, thanks so much, David, for joining us today. I know that there is so much inspiration out there that everybody got today to go and study the history around them, make it part of your life. You don't have to just go page 2, page 3, page 4 in the textbook, because that's not where history is. History is around us. It's everywhere, and learning happens everywhere all the time. Thank you so much for joining us today, and make sure that you check out David and History for the Ages, and watch all the videos and share as much as possible. So I will talk to you guys next time. Thanks, David, for joining us again, and have a great week, everyone.